The abandoned one, the wind, screamed across the frozen wasteland, carrying sharp snowflakes that cut like tiny blades. Captain Daniel Hayes could barely see through the white curtain of the storm. His boots crunched over ice as he moved carefully, scanning for any movement. This battlefield had been quiet for hours, but Daniel knew silence often meant danger. He was on his way back to the extraction point when he heard it. So faint, he almost thought it was the wind playing tricks on him. It's a sound, soft and broken. It wasn't the shout of a soldier or the cry of pain. It was different. A trembling hum, almost like a lullaby. Daniel froze, tilting his head to listen. There it was, a gench coming from somewhere beyond, a pile of wrecked alien vehicles half buried in snow. His orders were clear: leave non-humans behind, no matter the condition. But the sound stirred something inside him, against his better judgment. He stepped off his path and moved toward it. He climbed over the metal debris, his gloves brushing against cold, frozen steel. As he reached the other side, his breath caught. There, lying in the snow, was an alien woman. Her skin was pale, with a soft silver blue tint, and her eyes half-closed glowed faintly in the dim light. She was cradling a tiny bundle against her chest. Daniel took a step closer. The bundle moved. A small face peeked out, a baby. The child made a weak sound, a whimper that cut through the wind like a knife. The woman's lips parted. She tried to speak, but the words were broken, mixed with a language Daniel didn't understand. Her arms tightened around the baby, even though her own body shook violently from the cold. Daniel's heart pounded. She wasn't a soldier. Clothes were torn and stained with frost and blood. Around them were the tracks of others of her kind, but they led away. They had left her here. Left her to die. His radio crackled in his ear. Captain Hayes, report. Are you at the rendezvous point? He pressed the button on his earpiece, but didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed on the alien mother and child. They were both barely alive. The cold would kill them within minutes. Hayes, do you copy? Leave any alien casualties. They're not our concern. Get to extraction now. Daniel's jaw tightened. Every rule, every bit of training told him to walk away. But the sight before him burned into his mind. This wasn't an enemy. This was just a mother trying to shield her child from death. He dropped to his knees beside her. Can you hear me? He asked gently. Her eyes flickered open a little more. She didn't respond with words, just moved the baby slightly toward him, as if asking him to take it. Daniel looked down at the small face. The baby's skin was lighter than the mother's, with soft glowing markings along the cheeks. Her eyes were shut tight, but her breaths were short and fast. No, Daniel muttered to himself. I'm not leaving you here. He pulled off his thermal cloak and wrapped it around both of them. The alien woman flinched at first, but then relaxed, closing her eyes again. Snow was starting to bury the three of them. Daniel knew if he stayed here any longer, patrol drones would find them manned. If they did, Command would know exactly what he had done. He lifted the woman into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile, almost weightless. The baby stayed between them, pressed close for warmth. Daniel pushed forward into the storm, each step harder than the last. The extraction point was in the opposite direction. Instead, he headed toward an old transport tunnel he had seen earlier. The wind roared louder, trying to push him back. Ice cracked under his boots. His muscles screamed, but he didn't stop. The woman stirred once in his arms, opening her eyes just enough to whisper something in her language. Then she coughed, her breath weak. Hold on, Daniel said. I'm getting you out of here. Finally, the tunnel entrance appeared through the storm, half collapsed, but still offering shelter. Daniel ducked inside, his body aching from the cold. He set the woman down gently and checked the baby. The child's tiny chest was still rising and falling. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to take a deep breath. But it didn't last long. Outside, faint mechanical sounds echoed through the storm drones sweeping the area. If they found this tunnel, it would all be over. Daniel glanced at the alien mother. Her lips moved again, forming words he didn't understand. But he didn't need a translator. He could see it in her eyes, the plea for him. To save her child at any cost. Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon and listened to the approaching hum of the drones. He had just broken the biggest rule in the army, and there was no turning back now. The choice the tunnel was dark and cold, the walls damp with melted ice. Daniel knelt beside the alien woman, adjusting the cloak so it covered her and the baby. Completely. Her breaths were shallow, each one a struggle. The baby's tiny hands twitched, searching for warmth. Outside, the faint humming of drones grew louder. Daniel knew their scanners could pierce through snow, metal, even thin rock. Were sweeping for movement, for life signs. If they detected a human carrying an alien, Daniel would be marked as a traitor. He pressed his hand against his device. Tempted to call his squad and request a medical evac, but he already knew what the answer would be. The command had been, clear, leave all alien casualties behind. To them, she was nothing but the enemy. He looked at her again. Her silver blue skin had turned pale from the cold. Frost clung to her hair, which shimmered faintly under the weak light from the tunnel's opening. Her arms stayed locked around the baby, even in her weakened state. Daniel whispered, "You're not my enemy." The woman's eyelids fluttered. Her voice came out in broken English, fragile and quiet. "Child, safe. Please." Daniel felt something twist inside him. He had seen plenty of war victim soldiers, civilians, humans, aliens, but there was something about this. Mother's desperate plea that burned through every wall he'd built in his mind. The drone's hum was closer now. He had to move. Daniel slid the woman into a crouching position, keeping the baby cradled between them. "We have to go," he said softly, though he knew she barely understood his words. They slipped deeper into the tunnel, boots splashing through shallow water. The air was heavy with the smell of rust and dust. Somewhere in the darkness, the sound of dripping water echoed. The further they went, the more Daniel's muscles screamed from the weight of carrying them both. The tunnel sloped downward until it opened into a wide chamber filled with old cargo. Crates. Perfect for hiding at least for a while. He lowered them behind a large container and took a moment to catch his breath. His fingers were numb from the cold. He reached into his pack, pulling out a small heater disc and activating it. A warm orange glow spread from the device, filling the small space with a gentle heat. The woman flinched at first, then slowly relaxed. The baby whimpered softly, but soon quieted, the warmth easing her shivers. Daniel took off one glove and gently pressed his hand against the baby's forehead. Still cold, but warmer than before. He turned back to the mother. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Siren." He nodded. "Siren. My name is Daniel." Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, but something close. Outside the chamber, faint footsteps echoed. Daniel's head snapped up. These weren't mechanical drone sounds. They were lighter, faster human boots. He grabbed his weapon and moved toward the shadows near the entrance. A beam of light cut through the darkness, scanning the chamber. "Hayes," a voice called quietly. Daniel's grip on his weapon loosened slightly. "Blake." Sergeant Blake stepped into view, rifle lowered. His face was partly covered by his scarf, but Daniel recognized the scar above his left eyebrow. Blake's eyes flicked toward the crates. "You're not alone, are you?" Daniel didn't answer. Blake stepped closer. "Command's been looking for you. They said you went off route. What are you doing down here?" "Just clearing the area. Daniel replied, his tone flat. Blake's eyes narrowed. Clearing the area, or hiding something. Daniel's muscles tensed. He could see Blake's hand shifting slightly toward his cum device. You're breaking orders, Hayes, Blake said quietly. If you've got an alien in here, you're finished. Hand her over, and maybe I can make this go. Away, Daniel didn't move. She's not a soldier, Blake. She's a mother. Her people left her to die. Blake shrugged. Not our problem. Orders are orders. From behind the crate, a soft cry broke the silence. The baby. Blake's gaze snapped to the sound. Damn it, Hayes, Blake muttered. Reaching for his cum, before he could press the button, Daniel moved. He closed the distance in 2 steps, grabbing Blake's arm and slamming him against the wall. You're not calling anyone. Blake's eyes flashed with anger. You're throwing your life away for her. Daniel tightened his grip. Then, I guess that's my choice. They stood locked in a tense stare for a long second before Blake wrenched himself free. You're a dead man, Hayes. He backed toward the tunnel entrance, his shadow vanishing into the darkness. Daniel's heart pounded. Blake would go straight to command. That meant drones, soldiers, maybe even airstrikes. He turned back to Siren. She was watching him with wide, uncertain eyes. We have to move now, he said. She didn't argue. She clutched Leora closer and let Daniel help her to her feet. They slipped out the other side of the chamber, moving deeper into the old transport network. The tunnels were endless, twisting like a maze. Every sound seemed louder now, the drip of water, the crunch of boots on gravel, the faint echo of wind through cracks above. Daniel didn't know where they were going. All he knew was that he couldn't go back. Not to the army. Not to his squad. The choice was made. He had crossed the line, and there was no turning back. Somewhere behind them, in the darkness, the sound of drones returned. Only this time, there were more of them. Hunted by both sides, the tunnels felt endless, stretching into darkness with no sign of light ahead. Daniel's footsteps echoed in the silence, the sound joined by Siren's slower, unsteady pace. She clutched the baby tightly, keeping Leora's small head tucked under her chin. Every few minutes, Daniel would glance back, scanning the shadows. They weren't alone. The faint metallic hum of drones drifted from one direction. From the other, there was a different sound, heavy steps, slow and deliberate. Daniel knew it wasn't human. He'd fought enough alien soldiers to recognize the way. Their boots struck the ground, 2 different hunting parties. 2 different reasons to find him, and if either one did, it would mean the end for Siren and Liora. Daniel stopped at a fork in the tunnels. One path sloped downward, filled with dripping water and the faint smell of mold. The other angled upward, toward what might be an exit, but that was risky. Open ground meant easier detection. Siren's eyes searched his, her face pale and tired. Which way? She asked softly. Daniel didn't answer right away. His training told him to move toward high ground for better visibility. But the soldier in him wasn't the one making decisions now. The man who had chosen to save a mother and child was. He pointed downward. We'll lose them in the lower tunnels. Fewer sensors there. She nodded, trusting him without question. They moved into the downward path, the air growing colder and damper. The light from Daniel's wrist torch flickered over broken pipes and piles of rusted scrap. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, water rushed, then dashed footsteps behind them. Daniel turned sharply, raising his rifle. 2 figures stepped into the edge of his light. The armor was alien tall, plated, and painted in deep crimson. The soldiers carried long rifles with blades attached to the ends. One of them barked something in their language, the tone sharp and commanding. Siren flinched at the sound, instinctively holding Leora closer. Daniel's finger hovered over the trigger, but he didn't fire. If he killed them, the noise would draw both humans and aliens. He needed another way. The alien soldier spoke again. Stepping forward, Siren's voice trembled as she translated. They say I am. Deserter. They take child. Kill you. Daniel's jaw tightened. Not happening. He switched his rifle to stun mode, raised it, and fired. The nearest soldier jerked and collapsed, armor clattering against the floor. The second lunged forward, blades slashing through the air. Daniel sidestepped, driving his shoulder into the alien's chest and knocking him into a wall. The weapon clanged to the floor. Daniel didn't wait. He grabbed Siren's arm and pulled her down a side passage. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them into single file. Behind them, angry shouts echoed, joined now by the worry of drone rotors. They know where we are, Daniel muttered. They ran. Siren's breaths came in quick, shallow bursts, but she didn't complain. The baby stirred, letting out a small cry. Daniel Winstenny's sound was dangerous now. The tunnel twisted sharply, opening into a large chamber filled with old mining equipment. Rusted drills, broken conveyor belts, and piles of debris created a maze. Daniel guided Siren into the shadows between two large machines. They crouched there, the sound of pursuit growing louder at SYR, and whispered. They, both coming. Daniel nodded grimly. Yeah, we're trapped between them. Above, a faint metallic click echoed. He looked up and saw a drone hovering near the ceiling, scanning the room. It hadn't spotted them yet, but it would soon. Daniel pulled a small EMP charge from his pack. Thumb hovering over the trigger. One shot, and the drone would be down, but it would also alert everyone nearby. He hesitated, looking at Siren. She didn't speak, but her eyes told him she understood the risk. The drone's scanning beams swept closer. Daniel pressed the button. A sharp pulse of blue light flashed, and the drone fell to the ground with a heavy thud. For a moment, the chamber was silent, then shouts from both entrances. The alien soldiers entered from one side, rifles ready. From the other, human troops in dark combat gear rushed in, led by Sergeant Blake. Daniel's stomach dropped. Hayes, Blake's voice rang out. Step away from the alien and the kid. You've got one chance. From across the room, the alien commander barked something in their language. Siren's breath hitched. Daniel could tell she understood. They say, give child. You die fast, she whispered. Daniel's grip tightened on his weapon. Two forces, both ready to kill each other and him. He could run, but there was no safe way out. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the quiet whimper of Lear. Daniel took a deep breath. Then we make our own way out, he said, mostly to himself. Without warning, he fired at an overhead fuel pipe. Sparks rained down as the metal split, spraying a thick, choking mist into the chamber. Confusion erupted, both human and alien soldiers shouting. Weapons firing blindly. Daniel grabbed Siren and pushed toward a narrow maintenance hatch on the far side of the room. They ducked inside just as a blast shook the chamber behind them. The passage beyond was tight and winding, but it took them away from the chaos. Daniel could still hear the distant gunfire fading as they moved deeper underground. Finally, they stopped in a small service room. Daniel sealed the hatch behind them and leaned against the wall, catching his breath. Siren sank to the floor, rocking Leora gently. For now, they had escaped. But Daniel knew the truth: both sides would keep hunting them, and sooner or later, one of them would catch up. The betrayal. The air in the service room was heavy and damp. The small heater disk Daniel had placed on the floor glowed faintly, casting a weak light on the cracked walls. Siren sat with her back against the wall, cradling Leora close. The baby was finally sleeping. her tiny breath steady. Daniel knelt near the door, listening for sounds outside. For the first time in hours, there was silence, no drones, no boots, no gunfire. But he didn't relax. In war, silence usually meant something worse was coming. Siren's voice broke the quiet. "They keep hunting." "Yes," Daniel said. Without looking at her, both sides. "They won't stop until they have you or the baby." She lowered her eyes. "Why? Help us. Your people. Punish you." Daniel hesitated. The truth was simple, but saying it out loud felt heavier than carrying both of them through the snow. "Because I couldn't leave you there. I've seen enough death to know it doesn't matter what species you are, no mother should die like that." Siren didn't reply, but there was a softness in her eyes, now a trust that hadn't been there before. Daniel checked his weapon, then slung it over his shoulder. "We need to move before someone finds us." They left the service room, moving through narrow side tunnels. Daniel led the way, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Siren followed closely, keeping Leora warm under the cloak. After nearly an hour of walking, the tunnel widened into what looked like an abandoned cargo platform. Rusted rails stretched into the darkness, and an old transport cart sat on its side, half buried in debris. Daniel scanned the area and froze. A figure was standing at the far end of the platform, holding a rifle at his side. It was Blake. Daniel's stomach tightened. "You've been following me?" Blake stepped forward, his face lit by the dim glow from a cracked overhead lamp. A command. "Gave me orders. Bring you in, if you resist." His eyes flicked to Siren and the baby. "Eliminate the problem." Siren stiffened, clutching Leora closer. "You don't have to do this," Daniel said, keeping his voice calm. "They're not a threat. They're the enemy," Blake replied flatly. "You used to understand that. Now look at you risking your career, your life, for them." Daniel took a slow step forward. "Blake, think about what you're saying. That baby has nothing to do with this war." Blake's jaw tightened. "Doesn't matter. The brass thinks the kid's valuable. Some kind of hybrid, maybe. They want her alive. The mother? Not so much." Siren's breath caught. Her eyes darted between the two men, understanding enough to know her fate was being decided. Daniel's fists clenched. "You're not touching them," Blake sighed, raising his rifle. "Don't make me choose between my orders and you, Hayes, because I'll follow orders." For a tense moment, no one moved. The only sound was the distant dripping of water. Then Blake's hand twitched toward his cum device. Daniel moved first. He dropped low, swinging his rifle up in one smooth motion. A single shot rang out, striking the light above Blake's head. Sparks showered down, and in the sudden darkness, Daniel charged. They collided hard, rifles clattering to the floor. Blake swung a punch that grazed Daniel's jaw, but Daniel grabbed his arm and twisted, forcing him down. Blake fought back, snarling. "You're throwing everything away for an alien." Daniel's voice was low, dangerous. "I'm saving a life, that's more than you can say." With a sharp shove, Daniel knocked Blake into a pile of rusted metal. The sergeant groaned, dazed but alive. Daniel grabbed Siren's arm. "Go!" They ran down a side tunnel, Daniel scooping up his rifle as they passed. Behind them, Blake's voice echoed. "You can't hide forever, Hayes. They'll find you." The tunnel twisted and narrowed, forcing them to slow. Daniel's breathing was heavy, but his mind was sharper than ever. Blake was right about one thing: a man wouldn't stop. They'd send more soldiers, maybe even special units. Siren glanced back. "He was your friend." Daniel nodded grimly. "Yeah, he was." They emerged into a smaller chamber lit by pale shafts of light from cracks above. Snowflakes drifted down, landing silently on the ground. In the center was a hatch half buried in rubble. Daniel brushed the snow away, and pulled it open, revealing a ladder leading down. "This might take us to the old mountain passages," he said. "If we're lucky, we can lose them there." Siren hesitated, looking down into the darkness. Daniel met her eyes. "I'll be right behind you." She nodded, carefully climbing down with Leora in her arms. Daniel followed, closing the hatch. Above them, the ladder led to a narrow stone tunnel. It was colder here, but the air was fresher, and Daniel could hear faint wind ahead. They walked until the tunnel opened into a hidden cave with a small stream running through it. For the first time in hours, Daniel allowed himself a moment of relief. They had escaped Blake for now, but as Siren sat by the stream, rocking Leora gently, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the betrayal had only just begun. Blake wasn't the type to fail quietly, and when he came back, he wouldn't come alone. The hidden sanctuary, the cave, was colder than the tunnels, but it was quiet, too quiet. Daniel stood near the entrance, scanning the shadows. The only sound was the gentle trickle of the stream. Siren sat on a flat rock, rocking Leora in her arms. The baby was sleeping, her tiny hands curled into fists. Daniel knelt beside the stream, scooping water into his hands and drinking slowly. It was clean and cold, a rare gift in this part of the war zone. But he didn't relax. They couldn't stay here long. Caves this size often had more than one entrance, and any opening could bring trouble. Siren's voice was soft but uncertain. "Safe here?" Daniel shook his head. "Not for long. We need somewhere they can't track us." He remembered something from an old mission briefing about a smuggler's hideout hidden deep in the mountains. It was built before the war, when traders moved goods illegally between alien and human territories. The place was supposed to be abandoned now, but if it still existed, it could give them shelter. "It's risky," he said, "but I think I know a place." They followed the stream, moving deeper into the mountain. The path was narrow, twisting through jagged rock. More than once, Daniel had to help Siren climb over steep ledges while she held Leora close. The air grew warmer as they went, the sound of rushing water echoing ahead. Finally, they reached a heavy metal door half hidden behind a curtain of vines and moss. Rust covered its surface, but the locking mechanism looked intact. Daniel brushed the vines aside and examined the panel. The controls were old, but he recognized the system manual override. He pulled a small toolkit from his pack and began working on the lock. Siren stood behind him, glancing nervously at the tunnel they'd just come from. A click echoed, and the door creaked open. A stale smell of dust and old machinery spilled out. Inside was a wide chamber with low ceilings, lit by dim strips of emergency lights. The walls were lined with old storage crates, some still sealed. There was a workbench with scattered tools, a few broken chairs, and an inactive security console. "This is it," Daniel said. "The old smuggler's base." Siren stepped inside, cautiously, her eyes scanning the shadows. "Safe." Daniel was about to answer when a faint beep echoed from somewhere in the room. He froze. A small red light blinked on the wall near the ceiling, a motion sensor. "Stay here," he said quickly, setting his pack down. He moved toward the light, checking the corners as he went. That's when he saw them small, automated defense turrets hidden in the walls. Their barrels pointed toward the center of the room. The system was still active. One wrong move, and they'd all be cut down. Daniel's training kicked in. He found the main control panel near the workbench and studied the wiring. "Old tech," he muttered, "but still dangerous." Siren shifted nervously, her voice tense. "Danger." "Yeah," Daniel said. "Stay still. Don't move until I say." He worked quickly, rewiring the panel and bypassing the old security lockouts. Sweat rolled down his neck as he connected the final wire. For a moment, the turrets whirred, their targeting lenses glowing brighter. Then the lights went dark, and The barrels lowered with a mechanical hiss. Daniel exhaled slowly. "We're clear." Siren stepped forward, still holding Leora. "You know this place?" "Not exactly," Daniel said. "But I've been in enough hideouts to know how they work." They explored the base together. Most of the supplies were old but usable blankets, canned food, medical kits. There was even a small generator in the corner, which Daniel managed to start after a few tries. The soft hum of power filled the room, and the overhead lights flickered to life. For the first time since they'd met, Siren's shoulders seemed to relax. She set Leora down on a blanket and touched Daniel's arm lightly. "Thank you." Daniel met her gaze. "You don't need to thank me. Just focus on resting." As Siren fed the baby from a small ration pouch, Daniel checked the perimeter. The base had only 2 entrances, one through the door they came in, and another narrow exit at the back that led into the cliffs. Good for escape if things went bad. When he returned, Siren was watching him quietly. "You risk much for us." Daniel gave a small shrug. "You've already lost enough. I'm not going to let them take more." Her lips trembled slightly, as if she wanted to say something more, but she stayed silent. They settled in for the night. The base was warmer now, and the hum of the generator masked the distant wind outside. Daniel sat against the wall, rifle across his lap, watching Siren. And Leora sleep. But rest didn't come easily. His mind kept replaying the image of Blake's face, twisted in anger. Blake wouldn't give up. And if Blake had told command about the smuggler's base, they could already be on their way. Suddenly, a faint rumble echoed through the floor. Daniel's eyes snapped open. It wasn't thunder, it was the sound of an approaching ship. He moved quickly to the front door, peering through a small crack. In the distance, lights cut through the snow. A ship was landing on the ridge above the base. Daniel's stomach tightened when he saw the markings. It wasn't human. The enemies offered. The low hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the walls of the smuggler's base. Daniel backed away from the crack in the door, his mind racing. Alien markings on the hull meant trouble. If they had tracked Siren here, the sanctuary was no longer safe. Siren was already awake, her eyes wide and fearful. She held Leora close, instinctively rocking her. "They found us." Daniel grabbed his rifle, checking the magazine. "Looks like it." The sound of boots crunching on snow grew louder outside. Then, a deep, metallic thud echoed, something heavy landing just beyond the entrance. A moment later, the front door slid open with a sharp hiss. Daniel raised his rifle, but stopped when he saw who stepped inside. A tall alien in black and silver armor entered, flanked by 2 soldiers with their weapons ready. The commanders. Skin was darker than Siren's, with faint glowing patterns running along his jaw and temples. His eyes locked on Daniel first, then shifted to Siren and the baby. He spoke in a smooth, controlled voice. Siren stiffened, translating softly. "He says you will give me. And the child, you may leave alive." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Tell him no." Siren hesitated. "If you refuse, they will kill you." Daniel stepped forward slightly, keeping his rifle low but ready. "Then I'll take my chances." The commander tilted his head, clearly amused. He replied in his own language, and Siren's voice trembled as she translated. "He says you are foolish. The child belongs to his people. I am nothing to them now." That last line made Daniel's stomach twist. He's lying. They wouldn't come all this way for nothing. Siren's eyes lowered. He is not lying. I am outcast. She swallowed hard. Only Leora matters. Daniel's grip tightened on his rifle. You matter to me. The commander's gaze hardened. He spoke again, this time looking directly at Daniel, as if he understood more English than he admitted. Human soldier. This is not your fight. Leave, and you live. Stay, and you die for nothing. Daniel shook his head. She's not nothing, and neither is her kid. The alien soldiers shifted their stance, readying their weapons. Siren's voice was urgent. Daniel, please. You can't fight them all. Daniel glanced at her. Told you me not letting them take you. The commander gave a sharp order in his language. One of the soldiers stepped forward, reaching for Siren. Daniel's rifle came up instantly, the barrel pointing between the soldier's glowing eyes. Touch her, and I drop you, Daniel said coldly. For a tense moment, no one moved. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Then from outside, the sudden roar of engines cut through the silence. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the doorway. A second ship was landing smaller, faster, and painted in dark matte colors. The alien commander's head turned sharply, surprise flashing in his eyes. Daniel recognized the markings. Not regular army. Rebels. Blaster fire erupted outside, followed by the hiss of energy shields flaring. The alien commander barked orders to his soldiers. One rushed to the doorway, firing at the incoming attackers. Daniel used the distraction. He moved fast, grabbing Siren's arm and pulling her toward the back exit. The commander turned, his weapon coming up. But a blast from outside struck the wall behind him. Showering sparks, they ran through the narrow rear corridor, Daniel leading the way. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew louder shouts, weapons fire, the screech of metal tearing under pressure. The rear door opened to a narrow cliff path. Snow whipped at their faces as they pushed forward. Siren clung to Leora, her teeth clenched against the cold. Daniel kept his rifle up, scanning the path ahead. Halfway along the cliff, a figure stepped. From the shadows, it was a human armor, black face partly hidden by a scarf. The man lowered his weapon slightly and gave a nod. Hayes, heard you needed a ride. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Rebels? The man smirked. The kind that doesn't care what species you are, only if you can fight. Siren looked between them, confused but hopeful. Safe. Daniel glanced back toward the base. The alien commander had emerged onto the cliff, his soldiers at his side. Their glowing weapons lit the snow as they advanced. Not yet, Daniel said. The rebel handed Daniel a small device. Ships waiting down the ridge. But if you want to make it there alive, you'd better move now. Daniel grabbed the device and nodded. Lead the way. They raced down the icy path, the rebel moving fast and sure-footed despite the slippery ground. Behind them, the alien commander shouted something, and weapons fire cut through the wind. Energy bolts exploded against the rocks, spraying shards of ice. Daniel turned just long enough to fire a few covering shots. Forcing the soldiers to slow, they reached a flat ledge where a sleek rebel transport was waiting, engines hot. The back ramp was down, lights spilling onto the snow. Go, Daniel shouted, pushing Siren up the ramp. He followed, diving inside as the ship lifted off. Through the open hatch, Daniel saw the alien commander standing on the cliff, watching them rise into the storm. His expression was calm, too calm. Daniel knew what it meant. This wasn't over. The hatch sealed, and the sound of engines filled the cabin. Siren sank into a seat, still clutching Leora. Daniel sat opposite her, rifle across his lap. For now, they were safe. But both human command and the alien forces knew he was alive and knew who he was protecting. The fight ahead was going to be worse than anything they'd faced so far. And deep down, Daniel suspected the alien commander would be the one to deliver the final blow. A new life, the rebel ship cut through the snowstorm like a knife, its engines humming steadily. Daniel sat with his back against the cold metal wall, rifle resting across his knees. His eyes stayed fixed on Siren and Leora, Siren had finally loosened her grip on the baby, letting Leora sleep in her lap. The little one's tiny chest rose and fell in peaceful rhythm. Siren's silver-blue skin glowed faintly in the dim cabin. Light, but her face still showed exhaustion. One of the rebels, a tall woman with short, dark hair, stepped closer. "We're taking you to our main camp. It's hidden in the mountains, far from human or alien patrols. You'll be safe there." Daniel gave a short nod. Safe is good, but nothing's permanent in a war zone. The woman smirked. "True, but we've kept this place secret for years. We're not easy to find." The ship dipped suddenly, beginning its descent. Through the small side window, Daniel saw the snow thinning and the jagged peaks of a hidden valley coming into view. At the far end, nestled between rock walls, were clusters of small shelters, smoke rising from their chimneys. When they landed, the rebels moved quickly, unloading supplies. Daniel helped Siren down the ramp, keeping his eyes on their surroundings. The camp was quiet, but alive, human and alien figures working side by side, repairing equipment, tending fires, and carrying crates. Siren's eyes widened. Humans. And my people? Together. Daniel nodded. Not everyone wants the war. They were led to a small shelter on the edge of the camp. Inside, the walls were lined with warm blankets and a small heating unit hummed softly. There was even a bed, simple, but clean. Siren lowered herself onto it, cradling Leora close. For the first time since Daniel had found her, she looked almost at peace. "You stay here," she asked quietly. Daniel hesitated. "For now, if I leave, command will catch me. Not leaving you alone." She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "You already gave me more than I hoped for." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Siren's voice softened. "When I was left to die, I thought no one would care. Not even my own people, but you cared. You carried me. Protected Leora. You gave us a chance." Daniel didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being thanked for doing what felt right. Over the next few days, they settled into the camp's rhythm. Daniel helped reinforce the camp's perimeter, taught a few of the rebels better shooting techniques, and repaired old weapons. Siren helped in the medical tent, her skills as a healer surprising the rebel doctors. Leora became something of a camp favorite, often carried around by smiling rebels of both species. But even in moments of calm, Daniel stayed alert. He knew the alien commander and Blake were both still out there. And people like that didn't forget. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Daniel stood at the camp's edge, watching the shadows stretch across the snow. Siren joined him, Leora bundled in her arms. "She's stronger," Siren said softly. "You saved her." Daniel shook his head. "We saved her." For a moment, there was silence between them. Then Siren spoke again. "When the war ends, what will you do?" Daniel looked out over the valley. "If the war ends, maybe I'll find a place where no one's shooting at each other. A place like this, but permanent." Siren's lips curved faintly. "Maybe we find it together." Before Daniel could answer, a faint hum echoed in the distance. His muscles tensed. It wasn't the steady, soft sound of the rebel ships. It was deeper, sharper. Siren's eyes darkened. "You hear it too." Daniel turned toward the sound. The sky was still clear, but a single point of light was moving fast, growing brighter. A scout ship. The rebels moved quickly, some grabbing weapons, others rushing to hide supplies. Daniel stepped forward, rifle in hand. The ship passed overhead without slowing. But Daniel knew it wasn't random, it was a scan. Someone had found a trace. When the noise faded, the camp slowly returned to its routine, but Daniel's mind was already racing. The alien commander had promised this wasn't over. Blake had promised the same. That night, Daniel sat in the shelter's doorway, watching the stars. Siren slept with Leora beside her, the baby's tiny hand resting on her mother's arm. He knew they had won a little time, maybe days, maybe weeks. But the fight wasn't finished. It would come again, and when it did, he would be ready. Because sometimes family wasn't about blood. It was about who you chose to protect, no matter the cost. And Daniel Hayes had already made his choice.